there, and welcome to another episode of our Divorce Couch. You're very welcome. I hope you've got a coffee, pull up a chair, and we're going to have a chat. So my name is Claire, and I'm a divorce coach in the north of Ireland.
Hi, my name is Salma, and I'm a coach based in London.
Hi, and I'm Simona. I'm the divorce coach based in Germany.
And as you can see today, there are 4 people on the screen. So we have a guest with us, our friend Tom Nash. And Tom has very kindly agreed to come on and have a chat with us today so that we can look at divorce from a male perspective, because we're very conscious that we have done all of the talking and we're all female. So Tom himself is divorced a number of years ago, and he is also a divorce coach. So he's going to come with 2 perspectives. And the main one we're sort of looking for is, what is it like from a male perspective? Because sometimes I think we can all identify, those of us here and probably all of you listening, is that we get stuck in our stories and we think our story is the only one, but actually there is another person with a different story coming through a divorce process. And I know when I did my divorce, I remember thinking we both are going through an awful lot of upset. It's just different upset. And I think what we wanted to do today was just bring a balance and a healthier perspective, and also other things to think about. So, Tom, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're having me.
Good. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to work this by just asking Tom some questions, and then we'll just unpack and see where we go. So this is a bit of a curious journey to see what is it like to be on a male perspective of whatever a divorce story happens to look like.
Yeah. So we begin with the very first question. What was your divorce story? Give us a little bit of context here.
A little bit of background. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I suppose, well, with the story, it's the lead up to it as well, isn't it? Because it's not just the process, it's what was going on beforehand. So as you guys all mentioned, I'm also a divorce coach, one of the very few male divorce coaches around. So I work with a lot of guys, but I also work with a lot of women and couples as well. I suppose my divorce journey, if you like, and the story started a good 18 months, maybe 2 years before we actually separated, back in sort of maybe say late 2015, early 2016. And like a lot of relationship breakdowns, it all kind of stems back to disconnection and breakdown of communication, misalignment of understanding one another, and maybe not really knowing how to talk about those problems that were there, that were the root causes behind the relationship breakdown. I'd spent about 15 years in the city running recruitment businesses for my sins. I was retraining and coaching at the time of my separation, or just thereabouts. And it was actually through my process of my own separation and retraining and coaching and various things like NLP and such that actually I retrained and focused in the area of divorce coaching. My wife and I separated in March 2017. Our decree absolute was through by the following February 2018, so just under a year, and all the financials and that side of things sorted. And then the ensuing child arrangement orders came in, and that's where the bitterness and the contentiousness and the battling and the arguments, etc., kind of came from. And that was the really emotionally draining period, and physically draining period, and the mind trying to get around all this different information and feeling like you're preparing for this really horrible game of chess, as it were, going through the courts. But we've actually, my ex-wife and I were now actually very, very good friends. That Salma and Claire both know, but I'm not sure if Simone does, and your audience is about to find out. But my girlfriend's ex-husband is my ex-wife's boyfriend. So the couple's effectively swapped around.
Sorry, can I just jump in and ask, that happened afterwards that you realized, well, there is a bit of attraction on?
Yeah, so my girlfriend and her ex-husband had separated way before me and my ex-wife did. We were friends, we commuted together, we used to talk on the train, and I suppose maybe it was a lot of talking to her about what she was going through that making me realise that I was quite unhappy. You guys know I've always kind of held my hands up to this. I did have an affair. I did leave my wife for another woman, for my girlfriend. And it was her ex-husband and my ex-wife some months later met up, obviously to talk about us two, and realised that actually they were better suited as well. So they ended up together as well. And obviously quite interestingly in that, me and my ex-wife had 2 children. My girlfriend and her ex-husband have 2 children. So now there was this little melting pot of 4 kids that were going between 2 homes. And in each home was the alternate set of parents. So that was really, really difficult to deal with. in terms of getting to a positive co-parenting space when every single adult and parent has an emotional attachment and value to the divorces, the children, the finances, everything. There wasn't one, let's say, outside periphery type view saying, hold on a minute, what about, could it be this or could it be that? Everybody was so emotively charged by the whole situation, which made it really, really difficult. But ultimately, where we've got to now, it's also made it a hugely rewarding situation.
So how long would you say it took, I mean, to be at this place now, to say, you know what, we are now at a place of peace? Is that the word I could use?
Yeah, absolutely. Friendship, even. I mean, it's obviously go and have a look at my Instagram. It was only a couple of months ago, my girlfriend and I and my ex-wife's boyfriend, we took her away for her 40th for the weekend, and left the kids with grandparents. So we're actually able to do that now, and like it just makes things like transitions, like drop-offs, pickups, however you want to call them. It had to start from getting through the awkwardness and the weirdness, and that really strange environment. And it took for someone or each of us to start approaching things differently and to start doing things differently and trying to make a positive change and a positive influence for the kids and their outcome and their experience of this. But then it also took consistency of us all chipping in, and it's not the big gesture stuff. It was down to the smaller things like inviting him for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee after the school handovers, helping to support each other equally if one's caught at work or stuck in traffic, or being there to still support each other like we would have been when we were couples.
Because what I hear with that is interesting, because it took one person to ask someone in for the coffee, but it took the other person to accept.
Oh yeah.
So you can see there's the stepping stone approach of everybody having to move and shift a little bit and a little bit, and one person moving gave space for somebody else to shift, you know. And I'm just wondering, listening to your story, Tom, was there any point at the earlier stages that you ever had any idea that where you are now in communication would be any possibility?
No. No, not. And that's one of the things. It's about having to shift that mindset and that perspective and that point of view of things to be that what it is isn't what it will always be. And actually
it can change and evolve. That's
evolve. And I think that, I mean, I run my divorce coaching practice on 3 core values of understand, evolve, and improve. Everybody wants to improve. Everybody wants to get to a better phase. They maybe just don't know how to do it yet. But that requires evolvement. That requires change, coming at it differently. But you can't do that without breaking it down and understanding it, getting the knowledge and finding out what needs to be different, how you could approach things differently. And so it's all those stages that help people move through to where everybody would like to get, a more positive and improved situation.
That's such a beautiful story and such a beautiful, like, I wouldn't say ending, because obviously, you know, we're always on this journey of improvement. But I think what's interesting for me, I mean, what I'd like to know is, from your own experience of divorce and the clients that you work with, how is it different in the way that females approach divorce and men approach divorce? Are there any, like, you know, something quite obvious that, you know, we need to be aware of, or we need to, like, sort of I suppose reflect on when we're, because, you know, we're, like Claire said, you know, when we're going through divorce, we're very much focused on our own pain. And I know certainly from my own experience, you know, I think when I was going through that pain, it didn't even occur to me, I suppose, in some circle, or maybe at that point, it did occur to me. I knew that my ex-husband was in pain, but I cared more about my own pain than I did his. And I feel that did and still does have an impact on, you know, our relationship that we have, or lack of relationship that we have now.
No, you're right. I think it's every situation is so unique, as much as the people in it and how they respond and react to situations and how it impacts them emotively. I know for me, obviously I'd had an affair, I'd met someone else, I hadn't planned to fall in love with someone else. In fact, it was being a child of divorced parents. It was the one thing that as a kid I'd always vowed myself. When I got married and I had kids, that was it. That was, so that for me was a huge internal conflict of me judging and beating myself up in my internal dialogue I'd become something and done something I guaranteed myself from a very young age I would never do. So there was this huge amount of internal resentment, that the outward guilt that I'd hurt someone that was the closest person to me. And it wasn't because she was a bad person or a horrible person. We had drifted apart. We had not spoken about things, or maybe we had, but not in the right way. And we'd created a disconnect. And we shifted from a relationship where actually she was more like I loved and cared for her as much as I could, but not in a romanticized way. It wasn't the romantic side of the relationship. It was like living with my sister, if you like, and someone who I cared deeply about and etc. and respected, but never wanted to hurt. But ultimately, I did. So I think it's dependent on what people are going through. I think from a male perspective, and I'll just take my example for a moment. I made a lot of my early decisions based out of guilt and trying to rectify a situation. So I was alleviating a lot of that, let's say, control or power or decision making over how we were going to divorce, what the outcome was with the financials. Again, unique scenario, I'd earned considerably more back then than my wife did, or my ex-wife did. And I knew that I could replenish my finances a lot quicker than she could. So I was quite happy to do for her to have more of the lion's share. But that was on the basis that we were still able to create equal homes for the boys, and I could have an equal. I was always a very active and engaged dad, always have been. And it's one thing I didn't want to lose. But equally, that became the one thing that was also she knew, and that was the one thing that outside influences for her when she was upset and in pain, and the people that rallied around her were not a positive support network. And it was other people's decisions and experiences that were dictating hers. And she said this to me several times. That was driving her to go, actually, I know the bit that will hurt him is the kids. So he's not that bothered about the money. But actually, if he doesn't have the kids, that's the bit that will cause him more pain. And that's why the divorce was so quick and the financials was easy. But the challenge was the children.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. And picking up what you're saying is she was listening to other people's stories and advice coming from the only way they knew to see the world, and that it just has such an impact, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I remember I used to have a bit of a process because my partner Don and I, we moved in with each other after about 6 months. It was about 6-7 months, something like that. She had her 2 children, 50-50 with her ex. And in the very early days of like the drop-offs or whatever, I would see my boys at the weekend, drop them back at the mum's on the Sunday afternoon, and then go back to Donna's where she might have her 2. And I'd be an absolute wreck. I'd be a complete mess. So I started, after every drop-off, I used to drive about 5 minutes around the corner, get on the dual carriageway, pull up in a lay-by. I'm a smoker, so I'd stop and have a cigarette. And I put on the same song every time, which was Father and Sons by Cat Stevens, and just spend 5 minutes just crying and getting it out, because I didn't want to take that emotion into another environment and pass it on to other people, to my new partner, to her kids, or if I was going to see friends or whatever it might be. So I had to build a process for myself to just deal with it and get it out, and not dwell on it, but not suppress it.
Can I just ask, because that is so advanced in the grieving process to know this. Do you think at that point, because if I remember correctly, you have been already on that coaching journey that helped you? Would you have otherwise been prepared to know that you have to cry and basically have a break in between these two sets of situations, to not carry the pain and the guilt and whatever into your then set a meeting with your girlfriend? How did that happen?
It a little bit of knowing that there needed to be something, but I didn't know what it was yet. And in all honesty, it was purely by chance that I had my Apple Play on the car on shuffle, and that song came on, and just one day it just set me off to the point where I couldn't drive, so I had to pull over because I was an absolute mess. And then I thought, you know what, if this helps get it out and to process it a bit and to feel slightly alleviated, then that's what I'll do. And it just subsequently, I just made this little process purely a bit by chance, to be perfectly honest with you. But interestingly, now it's something that I know that worked for me. And if I recognize it in a client, I know as a coach how to query and question around what's going to work for them. And it might be music, it might be something else.
Excellent.
So it's about then saying, right, well, what's going to help you process this? What's going to help you not suppress it, but not sit in it forever? What's going to help you notice that dark cloud coming towards you, let it rain, and then let it pass? And it's about helping find the uniqueness that works for each individual.
Could I ask a question? Because I think it's great that you found that process to help you, manage your emotions. But was there, I noticed you said that, you wanted to offload all of this emotion before you went back home. Was there this pressure to have this sort of I'm managing, I'm in control sort of, persona when, behind that persona, actually, you were breaking and you were stopping, on the, in the car and crying because, this is what I think is important for sometimes like people that are going through divorce to understand that sometimes the person that we are showing the world just because, and I think men, correct me if I'm wrong, tend to do this a bit more. When I was going through my divorce, it was acceptable for me to sit in a coffee shop and cry, across the table with my friend and say, and I wasn't going to be looked down on in the people sitting in the coffee shop thinking, why is this woman sitting here with a cup of coffee crying her eyes out? It's almost like that's acceptable. But if I was sitting in a coffee shop and there's a man sitting at the table next to me crying his eyes out over a coffee, my sort of impression of him would be very different. Was that something that was behind this stopping and letting go of the emotions that you could go back and think, yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And I think there's a number of things that play a part in that. There's societal views, right down to the fact of, and I love Disney, I'm a massive Disney fan, but if you think about any Disney film, like how they get depicted and like men should be, or even if you think about any kind of modern day program, like the guy is societal views and media, we are supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be able to take it on the shoulder or take it on the chin or whatever, like stupid things that I don't agree with, like boys don't cry and rubbish like that. And we're taught this stuff and it's very archaic. And actually there is a pressure for it, and you're kind of taught to feel that you would be seen as weaker or unable to cope, which inadvertently, let's say my situation, for example, I wouldn't want to show that to people, because if people thought that I was weak, I felt that it could be used against me. I could be vilified, etc. in that process. And yeah, it's really, really scary. I mean, I've had a number of dad and male clients, anything from mid-20s up to in their 60s, who have actually come to us, and to be fair, it's just because they need one space where they can come and let it all out, and they can just have 5-10 minutes logging on and just let it all out, because there's nowhere else that they feel safe enough to do so. I think that a nice shift, if anything has come from the pandemic, I think a good shift in terms of how mental health, well-being, talking about what's going on up here and in here has shifted on a kind of global societal view to make it more acceptable. Companies investing in well-being and staff well-being, emotional intelligence, all of these things are working to shift that view. But again, I think that's a process. I've seen a lot of men's mental health charities that pop up as well, which again is great and absolutely fantastic. It's about a re-education at grassroots level. You've got to be doing this in schools. You've got to be letting know that actually whether you're boy, girl, or you don't associate as boy or girl, regardless of how you see yourself, emotions are a human process, and it doesn't matter boy, girl, non-boy, girl, tall, short, whatever. We all process emotions differently, and that needs to be acceptable, that things impact people in different ways. But no, you're absolutely right. I think it's I know for a lot of guys, and again I felt like this, just purely by default of being a guy, being divorced, and let's say being the stereotypical person that had left and had an affair, I'm therefore evil, I should be penalized, the legal system's going to be against me. Because of my dad, I'm therefore not an equal parent. I should accept that I should have them every other weekend to take them to McDonald's. But that's not diversity. That's not equity. That's not inclusion. And that doesn't send the right message. And it's about shifting that societal view and perspective. And again, like I say, a lot of the dads that I work with, I've had dads who I've worked with that have said, look, I've always been a present engaged dad, but yes, I didn't used to do the school run, or no, I didn't make the packed lunches, or I don't know how to iron. And some of the coaching work I've had to do is homework to go off and teach them how to iron, or do these things that they need to be a present father, not a presence father.
Yes.
That's a really interesting distinction.
Yeah. You know what I love hearing here is because my ex-husband had an affair. And I love, you know what, we kind of love to also point out that, you know what, growth is possible. And I'm listening to you, and there is nothing in me that kind of like, ooh, all these men, you know what, having an affair. So you can leave that behind you. So in a nutshell, do you think there is something like the two do's and don'ts in divorce? And would it make a difference whether you talk about these from a male perspective or from a female perspective, or is it something that can be for either side of it?
I think there's loads of very detailed, specific ones for unique situations, but there's always kind of more general ones. I know for me that having gone through the coaching training, because I saw a counsellor when I was going through my divorce, because I thought that's what I needed. Mm-hmm. And she was fantastic at helping me deal with the background, past history, child experiences, all that stuff. It still left me with all the unanswered questions. Now I've got all that data and that information. What do I do? When am I going to do it? Who can help me? Where's these resources? And that came from looking at future focused approaches such as coaching. So one of the big do's is do the self-work, do the self-reflection. Don't beat yourself up and feel that you've got to hold it all in. Whether you're male, female, regardless, do the work and be one of those people that actually is a disruptor to that societal view. Go and be one of those people that does it differently, because the more people that approach this differently, the more we'll change that approach and everybody else will follow suit. So do the self-work and find a positive resource that supports you and your unique situation.
That's so important.
The equivalent don't to that is looking at the support network you have, looking at and when we say support network, it's about ensuring that you're getting yourself surrounded by, whether it be emotional, legal, financial, practical, day-to-day, getting you out of bed in those earlier days, but having positive influence. Because if you've got someone who is bringing their own negative narrative to a situation, whether they're a coach or not, if you've got your best friend, your sister, the mum from the school gate, Dave from the pub, and they've had a really horrible experience, they're going to bring that to yours, and that's going to channel through you. So it's all about, think about like modeling, like when you're at school or whether you're learning to play the clarinet, whatever it is, you learn from positive people that have done it right. So why wouldn't you do this when you're going through a divorce or separation? Who do you know in your network that actually probably had a really horrible, challenging and crappy time, but they got through it and they've done it differently? And they don't have to be best friends like me and my ex-wife, but they've got to a situation that is amicable, respectful, supportive of their kids, etc., and has enabled them to move forward more positively and supporting one another. Go and find those people. So make sure that the don't is don't build a negative support network. I was thinking about the other do's. There's loads and loads out there, and we can talk about boundaries and all that sort of stuff. But there's one that I don't say very often, but I thought I'd share it with you today. One of the things that I felt I failed on as a husband and a father was my wedding vows. And being a coach and coaching other people, we all four of us talk about accountability, responsibility, call to action, control what you can control. And I think back to the fact that my wedding vows, I was making an accountability based on doing something for someone else, and maybe not necessarily for me, when I think back about what my vows were. So actually, when I was separated and divorced, I made a new vow that actually I might not have been the greatest husband, particularly at the end of my marriage, but I would always be a better ex-husband and I'll be a great co-parent. And that was a vow I made to myself. So now I'm accountable to me, which makes me stick to it better and more closely aligned than I did when it was an accountability vow for someone else. You're always going to do something that you want to do more than you would do than somebody else wants you to do something.
Oh, I think that is so beautiful. And I think I've only heard Esther Perel talk about it, that when something closes, that also needs some sort of, like a vow to make it special, not only the process of grief, but also finishing it and then basically have a promise then for something into the future. I think this is gorgeous. I love that.
I think my only other don't, my second don't, I kind of mentioned it before, but it would be as bad as things can get. And I'm not talking about really horrible situations where there is clear abuse, high conflict, and you need to be completely separated, but where you've got an opportunity and there's a potential to rebuild a respectful co-parenting relationship and a more amicable process of divorce, is to not always anticipate that, like I said earlier, what it is now will always be. Because if I had done that, and my ex-wife had done that, and my girlfriend had done that, and her ex had done that, we wouldn't be where we are now. And we wouldn't have 4 kids that flow between 2 homes freely, that come to one of the 4 parents for different things. If we'd all stayed stuck in that situation and expected it to always be like that, it wouldn't have created an opportunity and a choice and an option to be where we are now.
Yeah, to me, that brings out that idea of the sense of possibilities. A sense of possibilities, then you can become curious about what that might look like, and that sort of, it creates expansion, I think. So the perspective of this is where we are, this is where it'll be, or this is where we are, but what is possible, brings fresh energy, fresh ideas, and fresh options. So to sort of pull it all together, it's very interesting. Thank you so much for coming, because it's so interesting to hear, because your divorce story is so different to mine. And so we all have different divorce stories, but in the middle of that, everybody has to find their own identity and their own way through. And what I've picked up from what you said is that, you know, when you found things that worked for you and helped you, it allowed you to take one more step, which then enabled the possibility of somebody else taking another step in their story. And it's not disconnected. We are connected to these people when we have children, and because we have a history, and it's what we choose to do with that and how we choose to frame it and bring it forward. And when we listen to the likes of other people's stories, I think now how much I can influence people that come to me because of my story. Yeah. And am I a positive person? Am I a negative person when I come with a story to somebody else? I love the fact that I wrote down a few things, and you talked about self-work. And I think, you know, from a responsibility, accountability aspect for anybody on a divorce journey, for anybody listening today, when we learn to take responsibility for ourselves and our emotions and our actions, that's when we can create change, because we can cause a shift, because we want to do something, either keep it the same or do it differently. But that self-work, unless you want to stay exactly the same and stay stuck, this has to happen. And that's such an important do. And also to learn from people who've done it right. And I think that is just such a wonderful thing. You know, I look back on my story and I think, well, who did I look to and who did I find? And I found that people came into my world as I evolved, and I got what I needed as I kept trying to grow and reach out and figure out how to do this and how not to stay stuck. So I have found it really inspiring listening to you, Thomas. I think we all have. And hopefully all of you, our listeners, will feel the same, that this conversation will spark things in you to go, I'm going to think about that, or I'm going to look at this differently. And that's how we change. That's how we grow. Having an awareness is the starting point, and then taking it forward. So we hope you will join us all again on the couch the next time. We hope you have gained some insights and some penny drop moments from this conversation. And Tom, if you're willing, we'd love to have you back at some other stage and talk about your coaching journey and how that has impacted from your personal story into your coaching, and how having your story has made a difference to your coaching role, because I think that would be a fascinating next conversation to have in the future.
Absolutely. No, I'd love to come back. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So thank you very much. And we hope you'll join us again. Please do hit the like and share and subscribe, because we would love to be able to reach out to help more people on their journey. Doing this alone is just so difficult, and it's not the only way to do this. Thank you for watching.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks.